start with Juan-Pedro Garces-Voisenat. Did I say that correctly? Voisenat, who is my colleague here in the economics department. But his experience in economics started out with some very real-world experience in his home country of Chile, where he worked as a civil servant, holding advisory and economic analysis roles in the Ministries of Finance and Public Planning, participating in the elaboration of public policies. As an economist, he's interested in human development, poverty, and inequality, so quite relevant. Particularly the economics of education, sustainability, population density, economic philosophy, and a new interest in the role of societal values in economic development. So without further ado.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. As Siobhan was saying, the Millennium Development Goals have really achieved very important successes. I think the most important of them is taking people out of extreme poverty. Between 1990 and 2011, 700 million people have gone out of extreme poverty. Now, this is not a reason for complacency, of course. There's still about 1.2 billion people. That is like 1 in 7 people in the world living in extreme poverty today. Most of the successes from a regional point of view have been achieved in Southeastern Asia, and most particularly in China. But both in Latin America and in Africa, we have seen dramatic reductions in poverty as well during the 2000s. In the same way, there have been very important improvements in terms of child mortality, which has dropped by about 47%. Maternal mortality, more or less the same thing. In terms of education, I have numbers here. In terms of education, basically we have seen school children out of school dropped from 102 million in the year 2000 to 57 million in 2011. These are very important achievements. However, there's still a lot to do. There are globally 120 million youth aged 15 to 24 who still lack basic writing and reading skills. So far away from falling into complacency, we have to think about the future. And in order to think about the future, I think we have to reflect about the past. How did we achieve these successes in the past? And my point of view is that these successes were mainly achieved by economic growth in the developing world, especially during the 2000s. It's true that there has been an important progress in terms of social policies within these countries. I can think, for example, of many of these conditional cash transfers in many countries of Latin America, like Bolsa Familia in Brazil, which has been very successful, or Oportunidades in Mexico, Salario Ético Mínimo in Chile, etc. But most of the bulk of the success has been obtained basically by economic growth. And when we think about economic growth, especially since the year 2000, we are thinking mainly of China. We are thinking mainly of China, not that the other countries haven't grown, but basically the engine of growth over the last 15 years has been China. And we have to really ask ourselves whether this will be able to continue. China is giving some signs of economic fatigue at the moment. On the other hand, we see that growth that countries in Latin America, for example, or even in Africa during the 2000s achieved were basically based on a commodity boom. That commodity boom is not present anymore. And I was reading on The Economist the other day that the rate of catch-up of all developing countries, and especially in Africa and Latin America, has decreased dramatically since the year 2010. Basically because the commodity boom is exhausted already. So we have to think for the future, I think, in terms of devising new goals, new realistic goals for the future on how to revive the economies of the developing countries. Basically, I think, how to set the foundations of sustainable growth. Sustainable growth is not something that is simply based on a commodity boom. That lasts for a number of years, but it won't last forever. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in human capital in these developing countries. Up to now, they have done something, but very little, very little. They need to invest much more. Southeastern Asia did that for many decades. Since the 60s or 50s, the Southeastern countries were investing in their education, investing in infrastructure, investing in health. And that's why they have, basically, today, solid foundations for growth. That's why we see a country like South Korea, which is really poor, much poorer than most of the Latin American countries today, and today is practically a developed country. Basically because there are the real roots of prosperity in long-term investment in human capital, right, and infrastructure. So basically what Africa needs and Latin America need are to invest in their own engines of growth. They cannot rely anymore on whether China will be growing in the future or whether we will be able to have good trade relations with the developed world. They need to start thinking about themselves, to do structural reform in order to be able to grow sustainable and self-reliantly in the future. If this doesn't happen, I don't see that we can achieve the same success over the next 15 years as we did over the past 15 years. Thank you very much. Sure.
And,